Thank you very much, Karen Corlin. I'm happy to stand in for the Taoiseach in making this statement this afternoon. The European Council will meet in Brussels later this week on the 24th and 25th of March. That meeting will be followed by a meeting of the Euro Summit, also held in Brussels. This will be the third meeting of EU leaders within a month, and since Russia's brutal and illegal large-scale aggression and invasion of Ukraine began on the 24th of February. Before turning to this week's European Council agenda, I will briefly update the House on these recent meetings: a special meeting of the European Council on the 24th of February and an informal meeting of the European Council in Versailles on the 10th and 11th of March, as well as on the situation in Ukraine and Ireland's response to date. First, I will address the situation in Ukraine. We are continuing to witness scenes of acute human suffering, significant civilian loss of life, large-scale destruction of the built environment, attacks on nuclear facilities and repeated breaches of international law perpetrated by Russia in Ukraine. Over 3.4 million people have left Ukraine since the 24th of February. President Zelensky and members of his government remain in the country and continue to show formidable leadership in the most testing and difficult of circumstances imaginable. Last Wednesday, the Taoiseach spoke by phone with President Zelensky. The President thanked Ireland for our continued humanitarian aid, shelter, global support and sanctions against Russia. The Taoiseach assured him of our ongoing solidarity with his government and people, including in the face of the enormous losses that they have suffered. At least one Irish citizen has lost his life so far, with the tragic death of journalists Pierre Zakrzewski and also of his colleague Oleksandra Kuvshainova, killed while working as journalists. In his call with the Taoiseach, President Zelensky also expressed his condolences on the loss of Pierre Zakrzewski. I want in this House to offer our deepest condolences to their families and loved ones, and to all who have been bereaved by this terrible war. I strongly condemn also the killing of journalists, without whom the world would not bear witness to Russia's actions and to the plight of the people of Ukraine since the outbreak of hostilities. Ireland's primary objective is and will remain to see this war end. Ireland stands ready to support any initiative which can deliver peace. As we meet today, war is continuing, and in response, Ireland and the EU are providing a range of urgent direct and indirect supports to Ukraine. The EU has already agreed a package of €500 million in military assistance for Ukraine. Ireland constructively abstained on the lethal equipment packages, but will pay our full share, and our funding will go to non-lethal elements. As a specific contribution, we are also providing 10 tonnes of ready-to-eat meals and 200 units of body armour to the Ukrainian Defence Forces. The EU is likely to consider an additional package of assistance in the period ahead. Ireland will again contribute in line with our policy and commensurate with our responsibility. Additionally, Ireland is providing €20 million in humanitarian aid, as well as medical supplies. We are continuously assessing the best means by which we can practically and politically support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. The Taoiseach has welcomed Ukraine's application for EU membership. EU leaders have acted swiftly and have asked the European Commission to submit its opinion in Ukraine's application without delay. EU leaders agreed in Versailles to take the steps available in the meantime to strengthen the bonds and deepen the partnership between the EU and Ukraine. Ultimately, as well as bringing an end to this war as soon as possible, we must also pursue accountability for violations of international humanitarian and human rights law during the conflict. In the immediate term, Ireland's focus remains on meeting the humanitarian needs of those caught in the midst of violence. The widespread and generous response of the Irish public to the situation in Ukraine has been heartening in the midst of the darkness of the crisis itself. I was glad that across the country and the world, Irish people found creative and powerful ways to show solidarity with Ukraine in the context of marking St. Patrick's Day. It delivered a strong message that we regard democratic and humanitarian values as being at the core of who we are as a people at home and as a diverse diaspora abroad. The Taoiseach attended an informal meeting of the members of the European Council in Versailles on the 10th and 11th of March. Leaders adopted the Versailles Declaration, committing to protect citizens, values, democracies and the European model in the face of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Leaders were united in demanding that Russia cease its military aggression and withdraw unconditionally from Ukrainian sovereign territory. They agreed that those responsible for the indiscriminate targeting of civilians must be held accountable and welcomed the decision of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to open an investigation. They welcomed the move to secure Ukraine's nuclear facilities with the assistance of the International Atomic Energy Agency. They reaffirmed their commitment to the reconstruction of a democratic Ukraine and to continue to provide ongoing, coordinated political, financial, material and humanitarian support to the people of Ukraine. They also considered how to improve the EU's defence capabilities, including against hybrid and cyber threats. In their declaration, they also set out how the EU will reduce our energy dependencies and reinforce our economic base. Leaders addressed the importance of reducing strategic dependencies in critical sectors to make Europe better able to achieve both a green and digital transition. EU leaders committed to phase out dependency on Russian gas, oil and coal imports as soon as possible. This will require an acceleration of efforts to decarbonise our economies, as well as taking steps to diversify sources of energy supplies and improve gas storage. EU leaders will return at their meeting later this week to these issues, and Minister Brophy will elaborate further on this in his closing remarks later in the debate. In the period since, the Taoiseach has also discussed the ongoing situation in Ukraine with a number of world leaders. While in London on the 13th of March, the Taoiseach met with Prime Minister Johnson and emphasised the strength and unity of the EU response. The Taoiseach and Prime Minister Johnson welcomed the close collaboration between the EU, UK and other partners to hold Russia to account, to provide support to Ukraine and to address the humanitarian needs of its people, noting that in an uncertain world, the EU and the UK are key partners underpinned by shared values. During his visit to Washington DC on the 17th of March, the Taoiseach and President Biden discussed the situation in Ukraine, noting that the appalling events in Ukraine are a reminder that freedom and democracy can never be taken for granted. Both agreed on the importance now of standing firm in support of the people of Ukraine and to work together bilaterally at the UN to defend shared democratic values where they are now under threat. The Taoiseach also last week discussed the situation in Ukraine with Vice President Harris, Speaker Pelosi and with Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada. And in each of these discussions, there was a shared determination to work together tirelessly to bring an end to this terrible war. I will now look ahead to the agenda for the European Council on Thursday and Friday of this week. I will address the agenda items dealing with Ukraine, security and defence, COVID-19 and EU external relations. And in his wrap-up contribution, Minister Brophy will address the agenda items on energy, economic issues and the Euro Summit and external relations. Given the sharp rise in energy prices, including as a result of the conflict in Ukraine, the discussion of the issue by leaders is important and is especially timely. When they meet this week, EU leaders will discuss Ukraine from a range of perspectives: humanitarian, migration, energy, nuclear security and safety and reconstruction. They will also meet with US President Joe Biden, which will be a useful early opportunity to follow up on the Taoiseach's discussions with him in Washington last week. On security and defence, EU leaders plan to adopt the Strategic Compass. This is a strategy document that will provide enhanced political direction for the European Union's approach to security and defence policy for the next 5 to 10 years. Ireland has always engaged constructively in the development of EU's common security and defence policy, guided by our traditional policy of military neutrality and our contribution to crisis management and peacekeeping. That continues to be the case. We have played an active role in shaping the Strategic Compass, working to ensure that it reflects the core values that underpin our approach to common security and defence policy, including our commitment to the UN and a rules-based international order. The text sets out the significant security and defence challenges faced by the EU, including existing and emerging threats, the increasingly contested multipolar world and the strategic implications for the EU. It provides a strategic perspective for the next decade and sets out the tools and initiatives required to enable the European Union to act more quickly and decisively when facing crises, to secure our interests and protect our citizens by strengthening the EU's capacity to anticipate and mitigate threats, to stimulate investments and innovation to jointly develop the necessary capabilities and technologies, to deepen our cooperation with partners, including with the UN, which is at the core of international peace and security, to achieve common goals. Of course, while work began on the strategic compass some months back, the text also reflects the immediate security situation following Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine. We welcome in particular the strong focus in the strategic compass on efforts to develop the EU's capacity to counter hybrid threats and cyber attacks. As we know from our own experience in Ireland, such threats are faced by all 27 member states and are best tackled in close cooperation with one another. Different member states have different traditions and approaches in the area of security and defence. For us, that is our traditional policy of military neutrality. That position is fully understood and respected by our partners. We remain clear that our active participation in common security and defence policy does not prejudice the specific character of our security and defence policy or our obligations. The report of the Commission on the Defence Forces has given the Government some timely recommendations to consider on Ireland's own security and defence capability, which has been given careful consideration at this time. COVID-19 has been a standing item on the agenda of the European Council, and EU leaders will again take stock of the epidemiological situation across Europe. Their focus will be on coordinating efforts in response to the pandemic, as well as strengthening of pandemic prevention, preparedness and response. While Omicron remains the dominant variant and is highly transmissible, thankfully it does not seem to cause the same degree of threat as previous variants. Member States have taken the opportunity to ease restrictions and shorten the isolation and quarantine periods for close contacts. Case numbers are again on the rise in a number of Member States, including here in Ireland. Collectively, we must therefore remain vigilant against this deadly disease, which continues to circulate in our communities. Minister Brophy will later on in these statements address energy, economic issues and external relations. A ceann comhairle, tá sé léirithe ag an Aontas Eorpach agus a gcuine in Éireann, a rís agus a rís eile go dtacamíd go dangan leis an Ucrán agus lena séir ánig. Tá isagam go bhfuil gach duine sa teach seo ag tnú leis an lá go mbeadh cheasig siacán san Ucrán a rís, agus go dtí sin gur theasig muintir na hÉireann an fód le muintir na Ucráine. The issues before EU leaders this week are by necessity and circumstance complex and serious. They demand and will receive their immediate collective attention. The Taoiseach will report to the House on their discussions after the meeting. Thank you.